Dave Hart, is he owed an apology? That's what I want to dive into. What down, Coop?
Coop here. First down.
All right, first down for you, Caleb, because I know that Caleb and I disagree on this. So I'm just going to set this up for you, Caleb, and then I'm going to share my thoughts. What did Dave Hart do well as athletic director at the University of Tennessee?
This is in light of Rick Barnes' 800th win at Texas A&M. He is one of the most successful coaches in basketball history. Dave Hart hired Rick Barnes. He failed with Donnie Tyndall. I get that. By the way, some of those things that with Donnie Tyndall, like what people forget is he was fired over things that Donnie Tyndall's own school didn't know was going on. So it's hard to sit there and say Dave Hart should have known what was going on when Donnie Tyndall's own schools that he was at didn't know what was going on at the time.
Okay, I'm going to differ with you a little in this because I would never hire a coach with NCAA issues outside of football.
But he had none. He never had any. That was it. He had one like slap on the wrist thing.
That's something.
Yeah, but how many coaches? Rick Barnes had one.
No,
they all have them.
No, here's what you're not getting. I'm probably wouldn't have. Well, Rick Barnes is a little bit different. He's got a huge career behind him when Tennessee hired him. Donnie Tyndall's not that guy. I just wouldn't want to bring the NCAA around snooping about the crew team when there's a football team that makes 95% of the money. I wouldn't hire anybody for any sport that had any significant NCAA issue in his past. That's just where I stand.
I think you can make the exception for men's basketball because that's also still a revenue sport generator.
Yeah, I just think we're talking about 10% to 90%. Those are the numbers.
Dave Hart hired Rick Barnes. However, by hook or crook, he got Rick Barnes to Tennessee. Also, Dave Hart, y'all don't want to admit this, but he purposely played the role of bad guy because you're forgetting how bad a financial shape Tennessee athletics was in before he got there. And
wait. You're taking away second down.
Cooper May.
Sorry.
Second down.
What did Dave Hart do? So he said what he did well. What did he do poorly?
Well, I was poorly.
You were still on good. Finish good. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was still on good. Dave Hart, the good part was he made a lot of unpopular decisions and a lot of risky decisions to save the athletic department financially. And here's the big one. He did the necessary move of forcing Pat Summitt out the door. Y'all can hate that all day, but someone had to be the bad guy and tell Pat Summitt, you can't keep coaching.
That leads us to second down, Coop.
Cooper Mays here. Second down.
And I'm gonna retort on all this. So message board, get ready. Listeners, get ready. What did Dave Hart do poorly?
There was a few things. One, he kept Derek Dooley around for a year when he knew he was going to fire him. Because Dave Hart had effectively made the here. For those who don't know the full story, Derek Dooley lost to Kentucky in 2011. I'm sure you remember that, Dave, even though you were at ESPN, right? And Tennessee goes 5-7. Dave Hart comes out publicly and basically says, we're not renewing staff contracts. Everybody's on the hot seat. Everybody can get in trouble. Everybody's vulnerable. Well, so if you're going to do that, you might as well fire the head coach, right? Because the whole staff's going to get poached at that point.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so the whole staff got poached. And then Dave Hart let Derek Dooley, because of a poached staff, coach the 2012 season and collapse. You either show full support for the staff and the head coaches, or you fire the head coach. You don't sit there and say the staff is everybody could be on the chopping block. Staff's got to perform when you know the coach is going to lose his staff, and then you're going to have to fire him next year anyway. So he waited a year too long to fire Derek Dooley. The other obvious one is hiring Butch Jones. But I'll say this. Given who had rejected Tennessee and given who was available, Butch Jones was on its face the most qualified hire when Dave Hart hired him.
Let me ask you this, because Travis leads us into third down. Coop?
Tennessee center Cooper Mays here. Third down.
He was very vain, Travis says on the message board. Caleb, how much of Dave Hart's disdain that Tennessee fans have for him is because he just wasn't very likable. He was a weird dude.
I mean, I think that's part of it. There's the conspiracy that he came from Alabama to sabotage Tennessee. I think Tennessee fans forget that Tennessee was already in a really bad place when Dave Hart got there. So Dave Hart didn't have to work too hard to sabotage Tennessee guys. I think that's part of it. I think Dave Hart is a little vain. His press conferences, he says some cliches, and he doesn't come across as, I don't want to say this, he doesn't come across as the most forward-thinking guy. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
So he comes, and I think that's where it is a problem. But there are very few athletic directors that I saw willing to put themselves front and center in front of every controversial decision made.
Okay.
I'm going to say that in his favor.
That leads us to 4th down. But first, Coop, what should people do?
Cooper Mays here. Hit like and subscribe.
All right. 4th down.
All SEC center Cooper Mays here. 4th down.
If it wasn't for the whole Lady Vols situation, would Dave Hart be remembered more fondly by Tennessee fans? And I'm not including, because you're right about Pat Summitt, so I don't want to go in the Pat Summitt direction, but taking away the logo sat with people wrong. 4 downs brought to you by Dynasty Pools and Spas. Imagine having the best spas made right here in the United States of America in your backyard. Dynasty Pools and Spas, their showroom is open in Athens right off the interstate. You can stop by and check out the best hot tubs and spas in the market. And in delivery, yes, they can do that to Knoxville or Chattanooga. They've got complete support, spa cover, and chemicals to keep your spa bubbling at its best. They also have pool chemicals as well. Dynasty Pools and Spas, amazing discounts for first responders, military, and even some blemish models that can save you a ton, and no one will ever notice. Mention Off the Hook Sports, get $500 off. Mention Off the Hook Sports, get $500 off. Dynasty Pools and Spas. Go to dynastypoolsandspas.com or stop by that showroom in Athens. dynastypoolsandspas.com. Dynasty Pools and Spas. Roy, they could have hired Dave Hart and instead of athletic director, put the title Eradicator of the Lady Vols. And that would have been an apt title. Part of his job was to come in and fire a bunch of associate athletic directors that were doing the same job for the women's side. If you remember, it was only Tennessee and Arkansas that had 2 separate athletic departments, women's and men. And there were people doing the same jobs. Guys walking around making $200,000 a year that's doing the same thing that guy's doing, and they take 4-hour lunch breaks. So that cleaning up the financial end of it was good. Remember, Tennessee didn't have an emergency fund because they were paying out so many coaches, and they're now up to, I believe, a $5 million emergency fund. The other thing that he did is it's painful for me to say is he did make the tough decision with Pat Summitt. And that was a tough decision. And I honestly think that she was so affected by her disease, she would have coached for as long as she thought she could and probably thought everything was going okay. That's part of the terrible aspect of that disease that I've seen two of my grandparents go through. The one thing, though, that he did that still stands out to me is destroying the Lady Vol logo. If you want to tell Pat Summitt it's time, if you want to combine some positions in the athletic department, that's fine. But if you have 2 logos, you don't get rid of them. When you start a business, you don't have 2 logos. But it just happened organically. Tennessee had 2 logos. Why in the world would you get rid of one? That, to me, you take that one aspect out. I think people remember Dave Hart somewhat fondly.
He didn't know how serious people take the Lady Vols logo because there was
didn't know is nice. He had zero idea.
Because, by the way, the thing that Tennessee was unique in that regard. So it was it's so historically embedded. I will say this with Dave Hart. I'll say this about the Lady Vols logo. Shouldn't have taken it away, but that train of thought is why the women's basketball program is where it's at right now. Because there was this entire cling to tradition ideology of the women's basketball program that is as devastating to that program as Notre Dame football clinging to tradition is. And we are very dangerously, because of the fan base and the culture of the Lady Vols, they are purposely sending the program down a path that will have us talking about them the way we talk about Louisiana Tech women's basketball. Remember Louisiana Tech, how great they were?
And I'll tell you this too. There's an arrogance among some Lady Vol fans. I'm not talking about the people on our message board. And I've discussed this before when we were entering into agreements with Jacob Warren and Cooper Mays. That they thought they deserved, just because they worked as hard at their craft, they deserved the same amount of money as the football players. Well, that's just crazy, Caleb. I mean, that's never going to be the case. I don't care how hard they work.
No, yeah, that's it. You got to generate the revenue, guys. Sorry, that's just how it is. And you are right. There is a pride, because as I've told you guys this before, Tennessee should take a lot of pride in this. They were out in front on Title IX and embracing women's athletics before any other sport, before any other state in America was, quite honestly. It was them in Indiana. And they were the only two. They embraced women's athletics. They were at the forefront of it. And, let's be honest, in the Deep South, when a lot of, there were probably still a lot of places where the woman's job is in the kitchen that people felt out, right? Mm-hmm. And here's Tennessee in the 70s embracing women's sports and trying to create opportunities for women. And it built up something great. The people behind that still think it's the 70s. And they haven't been willing to move on. And so that's been a problem. And Dave Hart made a mistake with the Lady Vol logo. Now, here's the issue, Dave. Dave Hart, Dave. It didn't help that the sexual assault lawsuit against Tennessee happened when he was athletic director. And I don't think it was his fault and how he handled it. But when he called that coach's press conference and Butch Jones just straight up said, this is hurting us in recruiting, and just humiliated the entire university, I think that's why he had to go. Because Butch Jones was his hire, and he hired a moron who thought that who didn't realize that saying this hurts us in recruiting is rule number one of what you don't say in a situation like that.
The Butch Jones hire was strictly made out of a guy that was looking at resumes. Just resumes. I mean, so you look at him, he's done good. He's done well, at a lower level. He's going to do even better at a higher level, right? I mean, it was just resume reading was all that was. And whereas you look at a Mike Hamilton hire with Bruce Pearl, he knew the ins and outs of the sport. He had contacts that would help him. He had contacts that knew that Lane Kiffin was going to take the Washington job had he not moved on that. I just don't know that Dave Hart had any of those contacts in any of the athletic worlds. And to be so tone deaf about the Lady Vols, I mean, don't you just show up in that type of position where they made a commitment to you? And if I were him, I would have shown up and not done anything for 3 months, basically, and just got a feel and a tenor for what's going on. Your thoughts, Rick Terry Design. They want to be your jeweler looking for affordable game day jewelry. The Fire Opals are awesome. A Tennessee tradition. RickTerryJewelry.com. I'm sorry, Caleb. Go right ahead.
We don't know who was behind that. That could have been a Jimmy. Because look, let's call this. I'm going to call it what it is. Dave Hart was hired to be the bad guy. Okay.
And he did a great job at it. And Tennessee needed a hatchet guy. Yes. They needed a guy. Everybody's been in a job where a new manager comes in and you all know that he's there to fire everybody.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I've read about some restaurants in the past that they were franchised out and they were struggling business wise. So what do? You hire a CEO to come in and say, we got to close about 200 restaurants. Sorry, we just got to close them because we're hurting money wise. I think Dave Hart was that. We don't know if this was a Jimmy Cheek decision or not, and make Dave Hart be the guy to go out front and take the bullets for it.
Goodness. I mean, just the words Jimmy Cheek decision, just those 3 words together, just kind of make me. They make me uncomfortable. Like I don't want him making any decisions of what I got going on.
But we have to be fair here, Dave. Rick Barnes is winning, and also, do you think Tennessee has the infrastructure in place to fight the NCAA the way they just did if it's not for the financial work Dave Hart did in the early 2010s to stabilize the program?
Ooh, good point.